Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Dr. Glen Davies, but I think everyone in the room knows me already. This talk is, we're not focusing today on low carb or keto. What we're talking about is a whole food diet. So I'm just going to talk about how our movement away from eating whole foods to eating things like this and things like this has resulted in the big deterioration in health that we've seen since 1980. And hopefully after we've had this conversation, people will be encouraged to predominantly eat whole foods. If you remember, they look like things like this. Okay. All right. So let's get into it. So the topic is a better diet is the key to improving health. We will discuss what a healthy diet looks like and how much better we will feel eating a natural diet. So I don't know the exact date this photo was taken. It must have been somewhere between 1939 and 1945. That's just a random photograph taken of the Maori battalion during World War II. The point that I would like to make is that all of those men look surprisingly well and healthy, and not a single one of them is overweight or apparently suffering from any form of chronic disease. Not sure if we would go for the high-waisted swimming shorts, but you know, basically everyone looking in superb health. So that's, let's say, 1940. Now, some of you might even recognise yourself in here, but this is Mangakino District High School, and this is a photo from 1960. Again, I think everyone in that photograph looks slim and fit and well. All right. Now this is 1965, the year that I was born. Again, Mangakino High School, Form 1 and 2. And I think you would agree that everyone there looks pretty fit and well. Yell out if you recognise anyone that you know in any of these photos. But again, I think you would agree that everyone is probably in very good health. Now we might start recognising people. So this is Mangakino High School, and this is 1983. I was trying to find a photograph of the years that I was at Mangakino High School, and I couldn't find any on the internet. But you probably start recognising people you know in there. This was actually Vanessa's year at Mangakino High School, but not her class. So again, I think you'd agree, even going to 1983, everyone's looking fairly fit and trim and well. Yeah, I didn't want to make any specific comments because the person might be sitting in the room. And this is a forestry crew from the 1970s. I was interested to see that there actually still was a supervisor even in 1970. But this is the supervisor. Mate. Yeah. But again, you know, everyone looking very, very fit and well. And then something changed. And now when we look at photographs of logging crews or photographs of school photos, people are looking different. So So something has changed. And when you look at any graph of any chronic health condition, whether it be overweight, whether it be type 2 diabetes, whether it be cancer, whatever chronic health condition you look at, it looks like this. You see improvement, and then you get to around this period here, 1976, 1980, and you start seeing the graphs going up like that, and then they go up like this, and that applies to any chronic health condition that you're talking about. Something happened around this point here, around 1980, where all the graphs went from everything getting better to everything getting dramatically worse, and it's about 1980 that inflection point happened. So what happened around that time that would account for everything getting worse? Type 2 diabetes, obesity, cancer, virtually every condition you can name getting worse. What happened around 1980 that accounted for that?
Vaccinations.
No. No.
A low-fat diet.
This is what happened. So if you don't recognise this, this is the food pyramid that was introduced in 1977 and changed the way that the entire Western world is eating. This summary of a document is the reason that we're seeing this deterioration in people's health, largely through no fault of their own. You know, this has happened because of this. And this was introduced in 1977 by the American Department of Health. No, it wasn't. It was introduced by the American Department of Agriculture. This was not designed to make us healthy. This was designed to sell grains. Now, that there is probably one of the biggest travesties that has happened in the Western world for as long as we can remember. The introduction of this idea that we should be consuming 6 to 11 servings of grains in the form of bread and pasta and cereal every day. So that's there, 1977, US Department of Agriculture changed the way that the Western world, and probably the whole of the world, has eaten. Now, that in itself wouldn't have been, you know, the end of the world. That wouldn't have been actually so bad apart from the way that it was interpreted. So the idea was that we were adding carbohydrate and we were taking away the fats, and that was going to make us healthy and sell more grains. So this was the introduction of the low-fat diet. But the problem is, when you take the fat out of the diet, everything is going to taste really, really horrible unless you do something to it. So the consequence was that they started adding sugar to everything. So this idea birthed the high sugar diet and sugar being added into everything. And this is the reason that we are seeing all of these chronic health conditions. Not necessarily that, but the way that it was interpreted by the processed food industry. So let's look at that concept in a little bit more detail. That birthed this. This is the consequence, or this is the interpretation of that. This is the interpretation of that. This is the interpretation of that. You know, and this. You know, so that doesn't actually tell us that we should be drinking Fanta and eating lollies. The way that it was interpreted by the food industry is where it really went wrong. So let's look in a bit more detail. So 5 modifiable behaviours: smoking, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, excess alcohol, and the change in the way we interact with the environment has led to 5 non-communicable diseases: respiratory disease, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and poor mental health. So there is a direct consequence between these changes that have happened in society leading to those conditions, which has leads to 90% of the deaths in New Zealand. So 90% of the deaths in New Zealand are attributed to those changes. I'll go back. Smoking, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, excess consumption of alcohol, and the way that we interact with the environment. But I would argue that the number one problem is the unhealthy diet. Now, the New Zealand statistics are looking pretty grim. So 1/3 of New Zealand adults are obese. This is not just overweight, this is obese. 1/3 of New Zealand adults, and I would argue that it's not the fault of the individual that people are overweight or obese, it's the consequence of what the food industry has been doing to us. So 1/3 of New Zealand adults, an 18% increase in the last 25 years. So that's kind of that was a spelling mistake, but I thought I'd leave it there because, you know, it does bring us to tears to think that an 18% increase in 25 years, and it's predominantly affecting Pacifica and Maori. And the estimated cost of type 2 diabetes alone is $3.5 billion by 2040. We can't even afford to fix our roads. I have no idea how we're going to manage the chronic burden of poor health, which is resulting from the way that we are eating through no fault of our own. I would argue that it is the consequence of misleading advertising and the way that the food industry is marketing these foods that this is resulting. Now, this is one of the most disturbing statistics, is that for the first time in human history, our children are predicted to live less long than us. Apart from wars and famines, we would predict that our children would live longer than us. The next generation would have a longer lifespan than us. Now the prediction is that our children will live less long. That in itself, I think, is a major concern. This is the first time that this has happened in human history, apart from the impact of wars and famines. Now, let's get into a little bit of the juicy science. So, I think that Weston A. Price was American. Would anyone correct me if, John, do you know, was he American? Weston A. Price? I think he was an American dentist, and in the 1930s he travelled around the world and he looked at various indigenous cultures around the world, and what he was interested in was what happened when people moved away from eating their traditional diet to eating the diet of colonisation, or diets that were high in sugar and in flour. So, and he was particularly interested in looking at people's teeth, but he was also looking at general health statistics. So that's Weston A. Price. That was his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, that was published in 1937. And this here, I think, is incredible. this is the dentition of someone in the same whānau. This child living pretty much a traditional way, eating traditional foods, and this child who has moved into a town and is largely eating sugar and flour. It's not actually tooth decay that we're seeing. It's the change in the jaw structure. The jaws become smaller, and now we're seeing the overcrowding of the teeth. The teeth aren't fitting in the mouth. This has happened within 2 generations of consuming a diet, basically stuff like that. So sugar and bread. And I was thinking about the reason, and I wondered, was it just because we're not eating fibrous sort of food like that? We're eating soft foods like this, and I think that contributes, but it's basically the lack of fat-soluble vitamins and minerals that are missing in the diet. So Weston A. Price's Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. So regarding Maori, the native people of New Zealand, they had developed an unusually fine, developed as an unusually fine and vigorous race with stalwart physiques and splendidly formed facial and dental arches. Wherever they abandoned their native food sources and adopted the white man's food, dental caries, so holes in the teeth, and deformed dental arches have become common. He further contrasted traditional and modernised Maori diets. Those living in isolated districts where their native foods have been largely retained still had superb dental arches and high immunity to tooth decay, while those who have adopted the modern foods of commerce suffer from high incidence of tooth decay and serious facial and dental deformities. So that's New Zealand. That's less than a century ago, and that's the observation from Weston A. Price. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So what I found surprising was how quickly these changes occurred. You know, not over centuries. These changes were occurring within 2 generations of a change of diet. And this was the explanation. The fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, D and K2, are crucial for jaw and skull development. Western diets lack these nutrients, leading to smaller jaws, crowded teeth and weak facial structures. How many parents have had to pay out for braces for their children? You know, and it's not necessarily anything other than the fact that the diets have changed and we're seeing low levels of fat-soluble vitamins. Fat processed foods reduce chewing stress, leading to an undeveloped jaw muscles. Refined sugar and flour contribute to tooth decay and poor bone health. And this aligns with Weston Price's findings across multiple Indigenous groups where modern diets have led to rapid declines in dental and facial health in just 1 or 2 generations. Bill?
This jaw and skull development, are they indicating that this is the result of eating for a young child, or is it a fetal development as a result of sugar intake by a mother?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's turn that off because it's quite noisy. I suspect it's both. I would suspect it's in utero and childhood development. Yeah. So yeah, I suspect it's both. So we have entered the 3rd age of eating. I found this statement really, really interesting. So the first age of eating, microorganisms, so bacteria, for example. Hello, Jay, come in. microorganisms eating stuff that had never been alive. For example, bacteria consuming nitrogen. So this was the first age of eating. The second age of eating, animals and humans eating things that have been alive. Example, Lee's not here, but us eating broccoli or meat or fish or chicken, the second age of eating. And we've now entered the third age of eating, humans eating things that have never previously been in the food system. Since 1980, we have entered this experiment that we have not agreed to be part of. We have entered this experiment to see what happens when you consume things like this. You know, chemical concoctions. What happens when you consume things like this that have never been in our food system or our bodies ever before? What happens? And this experiment is ongoing. It's since I've been alive. I am the person, you know, the age group, I guess, that has been particularly experimented on with this experiment that we didn't agree to be part of. What happens when we consume the chemicals that are in this product? What happens when we consume the chemicals in this product? No human has ever been part of this experiment for 3.5 billion, since humans have been on the planet, we have never experimented in this way with putting this type of chemical in our body. And what happens, and we've already seen what happens in a very, very short period of time. In 45 years, we have seen what happens when we do this to the human race. You know, and how long have we been eating things that have previously been alive, things that have recently been growing, walking, swimming and flying? You know, that is the definition of whole foods. That is what we have been eating for the majority of human development in human history. We're now eating something absolutely different, and what will happen? All right. We are all part of an experiment that we didn't volunteer for. And this, I think, is the most disturbing part of this experiment. This line here, the green line, that represents lifespan. And we've basically got an average lifespan in the Western world where we're expected to live to about 83. But something really disturbing has happened. Our health span has deteriorated to most of us for the last 20 years of our life are living with a chronic health condition, whether that be arthritis, whether that be type 2 diabetes, whether that be a bad back, whether that be dementia, whether that be cancer. The last 20 years of our life, we are expecting to be living with some chronic health condition, and that is unnecessary, because you look in traditional societies, you look around these blue zones of the world, people are living in good health until they fall off their neighbour's roof at 100 years of age. You know, what you want to happen is you want to be assisting your neighbour to repair his roof. You know, you've finished a day's work, you're 100 years old, you've climbed down off the ladder, you're sitting down with your mates, you're telling a few stories, you're having a low-carb beverage, and you go to sleep and you don't wake up again. Health span equals lifespan. That's what happens in these blue zones. For us, there's a 20-year difference between our health span and our lifespan, and that is perhaps the most disturbing part of all this. You know, people might have a stroke at 65 and have 20 years, the last 20 years of their life, with a significant disability. That's perhaps as disturbing as the fact that the next generation is now predicted to live less time than the current generation. That has never happened before, and we have never seen this dramatic deterioration in health span relative to lifespan. Something has gone terribly, terribly, terribly wrong, and I don't believe it's the individual's fault. I believe it's the result of this experiment we didn't volunteer for. Poor diets are now the leading cause of early death. Poor diet has overtaken tobacco as the leading cause of preventable death globally. So that's disturbing. And one of the things that's really disturbing about this is who has bought the food industry. So the tobacco industry now owns the food industry, and they are using exactly the same techniques that they used to persuade people to smoke. For example, we don't any longer have the Benson and Hedges cricket, do we? No longer are you allowed as a tobacco company to advertise, but who's advertising cricket now? KFC. You know, so all the techniques that the tobacco industry used to persuade people it was okay to smoke. Do you remember the adverts, the brand of tobacco that your doctor smokes, you know? Now we're seeing our sports stars that we admire marketing KFC. It's exactly the same advertising campaign. Poor diet is now the leading cause of death, and all we've done is seen it switch from tobacco to Fanta and chocolate and KFC. You know, we need to be more awake to this than we were back in the smoking days. You know, because we didn't know until quite into it that it was smoking that was actually causing lung cancer. And then there was a big delay between working it out and it actually being, you know, public knowledge. You know, we now know that poor diet is causing all of these problems, but we're still seeing the advertising of this kind of food. So I'm trying to, I guess, wake everyone up that we shouldn't be as gullible as we were 50 years ago about smoking. And this basically is your choice. Your food can come from here, or your food can come from there. That is basically the choice that we are making. Your food can look like this, or your food can look like that. It's basically the choice. This here is a factory that makes canola oil. That is a canola oil factory. That looks like any oil refinery that makes engine oil anywhere around the world. That is a cow in a New Zealand paddock. Okay, this cow is breathing air and eating grass and turning grass into protein and into milk. You know, there is such a dramatic difference between that and that, but the food industry is trying to convince us that they're the same thing. They're trying to convince us that there is no difference between that, and there is such a dramatic difference. I'll just go to Sapphire first.
Did you just give us a quick why we shouldn't use oil?
Canola oil, I will indeed. I've got a bit of a section on that, so I'll talk about that. And someone else had a question?
Yeah.
Oh, Bill. I'm sorry, John.
The canola oil
Yes.
was actually used as lubricant for steam engines.
Yeah.
It was a good oil for steam engines because they had a lubrication system was called total loss. So if you drip that on the rails, Mother Nature can take care of it. Mineral oils is a bigger problem. But we killed the steam engine. So what are you going to do with the oil?
Yeah, well, you can apparently use it in your chain. It's apparently okay as chain oil in your chainsaw. But please don't put it in your body. And Sapphire, we will talk about why not. So that's the stark choice that we're presented with. And, you know, I think we have to take it seriously. Now, although the solutions are complex, the cause is very clear. Industrially produced edible substances. Industrially produced edible substances, that is ultra-processed food. So let's just think about what it is, what that actually means. So you start with something like this. This is corn. So that's only going to last for what, 1 week? You couldn't ship that easily to the other side of the world and make a profit from it. So here's an idea. Let's extract from the corn the oil, let's extract the protein, and let's extract the fats from it. Let's turn this into a big barrel of oil. Let's turn this into flour, and let's turn this into a protein powder, and let's put it all into barrels. Now the thing is, you have now created a commodity that can be traded internationally. It has a shelf life that is virtually unlimited. You can export that in containers to the other side of the world, and someone on the other side of the world can reconstitute it into something that resembles food. Okay, why is this not going to finish easily? Why is it going to be us that makes these decisions? Because there's a lot of money now invested in the commodity market around selling these materials that get reconstituted into food. You know, so there's a big commodity market around corn oil, around proteins, powders, and around these oils. So this is not going to go away easily, and the marketing of this will continue, and it will become more and more devious. We have to make the decisions ourselves. So industrially produced edible substances. Now, I don't think it's all evil, because part of the idea behind this was, could we create cheaper food to deal with the fact that many people are starving around the world? So if we reconstituted it into these food-like substances, could we deal with world hunger? So, you know, that was part of the idea, but as always, it's been overtaken by unscrupulous, wealthy companies whose only intention is to make a profit, and they have no interest in feeding the world. All they're interested in is profit and return to their shareholders.
A good example is margarine versus butter.
Margarine versus butter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Touch margarine with barge pole.
And I wasn't allowed to take from the Foursquare anything that needed to be refrigerated, because it couldn't be put back on the shelf. So I would have loved, just imagine I've got a block of butter here and I've got some margarine. You know, butter is a natural product and it is healthy. The margarine is made from industrially produced oils that have been reconstituted. There is no comparison. The only comparison between our butter and our margarine is that they look similar. Yeah, and why does the margarine look similar? Because it's been dyed.
Yeah.
It's been it's had flavourings and colourings added to it, and it's been altered to trick us to think that it's the same as butter. You know, and it's not. And don't be fooled by Olivani.
Yeah, that's right.
Olivani is only 25% olive oil, it's 75% oil. So don't be fooled by the marketing. They're clever. They're clever.
What about soft butter?
They've added margarine to the butter. That's what. You know, so the whole idea here is any form of processing will change the food and potentially make it dangerous. So I'll tell you about this amazing experiment. So they were feeding rats on rat pellets. So I guess just like your chicken pellets, standard rat pellets, and they took the same amount of rat pellets and they ground it up into a flour. So it's the same number of calories and exactly the same food, but they ground it up into a flour. They gave one group of mice the rat pellets, and they gave another group of mice the flour. The group that got the flour gained weight and developed diabetes. The ones that ate the pellets, now that is minimal processing to turn it from pellets into flour, but it caused overweight and diabetes, that small amount of processing. So this amount of processing is extreme, you know, but what happens if we do minimal processing? You know, so you know, is this still a healthy product or is this an ultra-processed food? Well, that's biltong. We'll come to that question soon. So what is the definition of an ultra-processed food? Wrapped in plastic with at least one ingredient that you wouldn't find in your home kitchen. You know, I think that needs to become a mantra. An ultra-processed food is wrapped in plastic and contains one ingredient that you wouldn't find in your home pantry. Now, let's have a look at this. Now, the problem with with ingredient lists is it's so small you can't read it, but one ingredient that you wouldn't find in your home kitchen. Let's look at these 2-minute noodles. I will read you the ingredient list. Wheat flour, modified starch, sunflower oil, canola oil, wheat, gluten, garlic extract, emulsifiers, soybean oil, antioxidants, emulsifiers, and there's a whole list of numbers, green tea extract, colour 101, and the list goes on and on and on, and most of it is numbers. So there is probably 20 ingredients in here that you wouldn't find in your home kitchen because none of us in our home kitchen have colouring 101. You know, so that's a really, really good rule, you know, and that I would consider poison. It's interesting though, there's an economic measure called the 2-minute noodle index, and it's a direct correlation with poverty. So the higher the poverty in a country, the higher the consumption of 2-minute noodles. As affluence increases, the consumption of 2-minute noodles go down. So, you know, we are poisoning the poorest people in the world with products like that. You know, is that the definition of evil? Maybe.
I always say that the ingredients that takes you too long to read, you shouldn't be touching it.
And if there's ingredients you can't pronounce,
yes.
like
well, it's quite simple. Use the ingredient list as a warning sign.
Yeah.
a warning label. So how many ingredients in that?
Yeah.
One. Okay, there's one ingredient in here, only broccoli, you know, so that's not an ultra-processed food. Research from South and Central America, metabolic diseases such as type 2 diabetes have gone from virtually unheard of to the dominant public concern in little over 1 decade. 10 years. Type 2 diabetes has gone from being almost unheard of to the dominant public health concern in 1 decade. You know, 10 years, if you look at the length of human history, 3.5 million years, a decade is just, it's a tiny, tiny amount of time. These changes are happening so fast. Now, these people are trying to mislead us because this product here, Diet Coke, is by definition a health food. It has 4 green stars on the American food rating because it's low in fat, low in salt, low in sugar, and low in saturated fat. It's considered a health food. How could Diet Coke ever be considered a health food? You know, how corrupt is the system that allows that? Look at the ingredients. You know, water, it contains caramel E150D. Sweeteners, now aspartame. Aspartame is a poison. It's a poison. It causes cancer in rats. Natural flavourings, including caffeine, phosphoric acid and citric acid. You know, how could that be considered a health food? You know, that is a health food. Diet Coke is not a health food. There are up to 15,000 different food additives in the United States. 15,000 different food additives in the United States. Now, ultra-processed food is most of what we eat. 60% of the calories on average, and 80% of the diet for the typical teenager is ultra-processed food. So only 20% of a teenager's diet consists of whole food. 80% is ultra-processed food. It's coming in, packets and looking like that. That is really, really disturbing, particularly when you're expected to learn. Characteristics of ultra-processed food. They are soft, they're consumed more quickly, so you can get more calories into your body in a short period of time. If you think eating white bread compared with eating a whole grain bread, you can eat that more quickly because it's soft. So you get more calories in, and that's, and you're getting more obesity. It's dry, it's energy dense, which means it contains a lot of calories, but it's low in nutrients. The fatty textures are created without adding fat, and the savoury taste is created without adding protein. The sweet taste occurs without adding carbs. Savoury without protein, slimy without fat, artificially flavoured, contains sweeteners, emulsifiers. It affects the friendly microbiome that are designed to digest the food that we can't, like fibre. So it's just worrying and disturbing. That I came across that photo. That's a modern take on kai Maori. So those are all traditional Maori cuisine. Sorry it didn't come out very well, but you can see fish. I don't know what type of fish that is. You can see pumpkin, kumara. I think those are mussels at the top. So that's the modern take on what we were eating. Let's look at the pre-European Maori diet. It was high in omega-3 fatty acids from consuming fish, which promoted heart and brain health. It was high in collagen and gelatin, which supported joint health. It was high in fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K2, essential for strong bones and teeth. Very little tooth decay due to the diet being low in sugar, and strong, well-formed jaws, dental arches from chewing fibrous food. So Tupuna did not eat refined sugar or flour. There was no dairy, there was no wheat or bread, there was no alcohol. And pre-European Maori were described as one of the most beautiful, one of the most robust, and one of the strongest races on earth. Now, what do we eat? We eat things that look like that. And things that look like that. Where we could be eating things that look like that. And we could be eating things that look like that. Now, just a few little wee stories. So we visited the Chatham Islands, which I imagine must have been what fishing was like before New Zealand waters were overfished. And at the top there, that's weka. And then there was every form of crayfish that you could imagine. And there was crayfish and paua pie. There was crayfish mornay. There was raw crayfish. There was every sort of crayfish that you got sick of eating crayfish. That's a community garden. So those happy-looking people are growing crops in a community garden. So ideally we'd be all growing our own gardens, but it's not necessarily an option for everyone. So we have community gardens. That's a picture of our greenhouse and raised gardens before we put the glass in the greenhouse. That's a picture of some of the produce that came from our garden. Interestingly, that cauliflower doesn't look as good as a commercially grown one, and the apples have holes in them, and the Brussels sprouts didn't look quite as big, but hey, it's all homegrown, no sprays.
Is that kale in there? They have more.
Yep, that was kale. That's once the greenhouse got up and going. Now, pig hunting, I believe that pigs are a mythical creature similar to unicorns, because every time I've been pig hunting, I've never seen a pig. I don't believe they exist. I believe that this hunter actually just went to a butcher and got a pig, because I do not believe they exist. I have never seen a pig on any pig hunting trip I've ever been on, but apparently they do exist. The point about this is we have amazing access to this organic meat. We have access to deer, and I know in this community, there are many, many people who hunt when they don't put 1080 into the kaimanawas. Why are they spraying 1080 so that you can't hunt? I think it's the stand down's 5 months, is it, between when they drop 1080 and when you're allowed to hunt again?
For dogs,
Yeah, so what a crime. But anyway, we can access high quality wild venison and pork. The reason that you can't see my face in this is I went spearfishing with the neighbour Paul, but I didn't actually get that kawa he did, so I had to cut my face out of it, because the biggest fish I got was kind of like about that big. So Paul got that kawa. And some of you might know this fella. This is Vanessa's brother. This is Kerry, and that was a trout caught in Lake Taupo recently. I don't know this man. I just thought it was a very, very cool photo. Okay. So that's the end of the talk. So I just wanted to just read some of or look at the way that we're being misled. So I know that lots and lots of people have these caramel latte. That is full of sugar compared with coffee. That contains so much artificial colour. I don't know. And this one here, I don't know when anyone last ate Spam, but it's, that's got a whole lot of colourings and preservatives in it. Now, I think I'll just stop with this one here. This is dog food. So when did we ever get the ideas that dogs were supposed to eat vegetables and grains? As far as I understand, dogs eat meat, and they've eaten meat since the beginning of time. This product here contains 20% protein. There's only 20% protein. This is basically grains and carbs, and no wonder our animals are overweight, and no wonder they're suffering from all these chronic health conditions, because we're feeding stuff like this to animals. They're supposed to eat meat. Dogs and cats are supposed to eat meat. And this here, candy floss, the only ingredient in that is sugar and 2 forms of colouring. There is no nutrient value in that, compared with, that, which is full of nutrients. I just wanted to make a comment. There is a difference between those 2 products. This is a Granny Smith apple. That's a traditional form of apple. This is one of these highly hybridized, I think that's a Splendor apple. This is highly hybridized to increase the sugar content, compared with the traditional apple. And grains, with the amount of gluten in wheat that has been hybridized and grown in New Zealand is dramatically higher than what it is in traditional wheat. So what should we be eating? Something that has recently been growing, walking, swimming, or flying. If that was all that we ate, I would predict that we would not be seeing obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and dementia. It's because we're persuaded that it's okay to eat stuff like this. Sapphire, you wanted me to talk about canola oil. Traditional oils, things that have been around for, say, 100 years, absolutely fine. So coconut oil, lard, butter, olive oil. Olive oil is actually interesting though, isn't it? There's a huge difference between a high quality olive oil and a poor quality one. The amount of polyphenols in a high quality olive oil is dramatically different in a poor quality one. You know, olive oil has to be cold pressed, it has to be extra virgin, it has to be kept in a dark bottle, it can't be exposed to oxygen, and the polyphenols will deteriorate within 1 year. You know, so there's a whole lot. But canola oil that's been made in a factory from rapeseed is a poison. And I have never found a commercial mayonnaise that is not made with canola oil. You basically have to follow the rule. You have to make your own. Now, that there is maple syrup. Now, our low carb and keto people would know that I wouldn't be promoting maple syrup, but this is natural maple syrup. This came out of a maple tree. This is basically a whole food compared with, sorry, I thought I had grabbed one of the artificial ones. It's actually honey, I just grabbed the wrong one. Pretend that this is one of these artificial maple syrups. It's just got maple flavouring in it. It's sugar syrup with maple flavouring. So that was about all I wanted to say, is we need to return to eating a traditional type diet as much as we can, that is basically fruit, vegetables, meat, fish and chicken. And if we were to eat that way, we would be healthy again. Our animals should also be eating like that, but we are not. 80% of a teenager's diet, looks like that. So let's just try and do that. Let's do that for our children. Let's do that for our mokopuna. Let's start a wave of eating whole foods, which involves hunting, fishing and growing gardens. And it takes more effort, but we need to start. Oh, that's on the wrong side. We need to start. That's on the wrong side too. So that was all I wanted to say.
Eggs.
And eggs. I haven't got any eggs. Yep. Eggs are great. Wonderful source of protein. So eggs should be here. This is not an exhaustive list, of course, because I couldn't take the fish, I couldn't take the chicken. But fish. Fish nuggets is not fish. That is a processed food. Chicken nuggets is not chicken. Chicken nuggets is an ultra processed food. So why is the children's menu in a restaurant chicken nuggets and French fries and tomato sauce? Why do we think it's okay to do that to our children? Shouldn't, traditionally the children were being given the best food and the parents had what was left. Now we're giving our children the worst food, and we'll eat the broccoli and the cauliflower, but the kids won't. Why are we poisoning our mokopuna? Why as grandparents, I'm not a grandparent yet, but why as grandparents do we think it's okay to give children treats like that? This is a poison. We know it's a poison. We can clearly see that it's a poison. Why do we think that's a good idea? When the children come to stay with you, this is what they should be eating. So when they go back to their parents, the parents don't have the hard job of trying to persuade them to eat like that, because when they were with you, they were eating this stuff. And don't be fooled by the food companies. that is not a health food, even if Iron Men eat it. Grant Schofield and I got in trouble because we were talking at an Ironman event and this was the main sponsor, and we got stuck in to the main sponsor of the Ironman. When we asked if we could talk again the next year, they said no.
What about low carb breads that's out on the market now? What do you think about it?
So what I've talked about today is Nutrition 101. I'm talking about what is the diet that you would eat if you are well to stay well. So if you are well, you can eat some fruit. You can eat some root vegetables if you are well. Now that is different from the diet you might choose if you already have a chronic health condition, and then we'd be talking about low carb and we'll be talking about keto, and we're going to move on and talk about that in a month's time. But this idea is, this is what you would give to your healthy teenagers to keep them well. Yep. They haven't developed a metabolic condition yet. They can eat this to stay well.
I think also in the 70s,
yes,
late 60s, right through the 70s, everybody that I knew all had big vegetable gardens. And everybody went out there and picked all their own vegetables.
Yeah.
And the meat you got from the butcher shop, and there's no such. And the sausages were probably made by that butcher.
Yes.
Were processed. Now, how many people have got gardens? Not a lot.
Janet.
There's a lovely community garden here.
Yes, there is.
I know of one.
It's just over there, isn't it?
We did a little drive-by because we were early, and it's prolific.
Yeah.
It's the shop. Lovely
The
people.
man over there, Lloyd, is the king of that garden.
Well, congratulations.
He's the king. Really, he does a great job.
We've got a community garden at Nukahala.
I think what we should be probably promoting here, if we can, is, we've got that community garden over there. We grew a lot of stuff this year, and a lot of it didn't get used. So the more that this is pushed, the more that'll get used, and it'll make it better for the people that are actually doing it,
And one thing that I understood is the traditional way that food was distributed at Marae was, if you had a big family, you could take a lot of food, and if you had a small family, you just took a little bit. So there's a lot of tradition around the way that food was distributed around families. So yeah, Sapphire.
I wonder if you could do a talk for our teenage, our teenagers, like something where you can sort of really grasp their attention.
That's what's needed,
Yeah. Because I've been trying to do the healthy eating, but because we ate unhealthy for so long, and trying to reverse that in the teenagers and the young children, it proves to be a bit of a task. And I feel like I'm harping down their throat sometimes.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, and I think if it comes from me, it takes some of the pressure off the parents. But one of the things that's really, really interesting around that science is that children mimic their father's eating habits, not their mother's. And I found that interestingly. So if you want to create change in your children's eating, it's the dads have to demonstrate what to eat, which I found interesting. I didn't anticipate that. That's science.
Mothers always did all the cooking in those days. Perhaps not so much now.
Yeah.
A lot of dads do more, but years ago they didn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, that probably explains why my kids are rat bags.
It probably does, Bill. Janet.
The thing is that our families are watching us, and that's why I got into this, because of my obese granddaughter, and I thought I can't tell her what to do, but I can lead by example. So they watch, and it's interesting. I've got a large family. It's interesting how many are doing low carb and keto now, just by seeing seeing the example. But getting back to Weston Price, he was born in 1870 in Ontario, Canada.
Oh, Canada.
And
Thank you.
The important thing, well, personally, I got a grandson courtesy of him, because my daughter-in-law was researching Weston Price after she had had her third miscarriage, and she was researching dental decay, and in the research, Weston Price said poor nutrition contributes to miscarriages. So she radically threw out all the plastic in the house, all the microwave, and all the sugar and all that, and a year later had a beautiful son born at home, and he's 13 this month. So Weston Price did extensive research, but he did it on the cats. You know, he did cats in one compound fed certain good food, and cats in another compound that weren't, and it was very quickly that cats on poor nutrition became deformed, infertile, diseased and dead.
Yeah. And probably, I think in 5 generations, they became infertile, didn't they? Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've hit 7 o'clock, so I'll call it quits. But if there's any last question, yeah. We'll come back and we'll speak if we're welcome on the first Monday of every month. And I want to talk about low carb next time, which is one of the diets that you might choose if you already have got here. You know, if you're already here and you want to turn it around, low carb is one of the examples of what you might do. And so in a low carb diet, we're going to be taking some of this stuff and moving it to the middle. Because you have to take out most of the carbs. So we'll talk about that in a month's time. So thank you very much. All right. Cheers.